Greetings, my fellow Americans, and welcome to another episode of the Great Montana Conspiracy Podcast. I'm going to say right up front, this is probably going to be a relatively short video today, primarily because it's more of an announcement video than it is actually a discussion of a legal principle and how the conspiracy wraps itself around the various things it does to keep in power. It is going to be talking about that. It absolutely is on topic. It's just going to be more of a personal issue revolving around me and the reasons and justifications behind what's going on. On Friday, November 5th, 2021, I mailed a motion for conditional discharge from supervision. Now, this seems like a very simple thing. It should be a very simple thing. But in my situation, these things are very rarely simple. Retaliation goes hand in hand with whatever I do, regardless of how legal it is, regardless of how proper it is, regardless of what it's the right thing to do. I get retaliated against, and I'm doing this with great fear in my heart that there will be an attempt to revoke me yet again to stop this effort to get free. Now, I've explained in previous blog posts, not so much in this podcast, so it's a subject that does need to be discussed. In Montana, you're sentenced to supervised conditions, but you're detained under probationary conditions, which means even though they're technically two separate sentences running simultaneously in a violation of double jeopardy, they are nevertheless done. As a consequence, if you are out on a supervised time and you commit a crime, they use the probation violation to then give you back all of your time under supervised conditions, under supervised released. It's a messed up system and it does require a great deal more discussion. I'm going to try not to belabor this particular video because it is a subject that does need to be covered in greater depth. But you can always go to my Montana Conspiracy, the Great Montana Conspiracy blog, and you'll find my discussion on it there. I simply haven't discussed it in the podcast. But basically, in a nutshell, because I was sentenced to 15 years suspended time, which means I'm not supposed to be serving, it's a condition instead of custody, it is, there's no penalties, no consequence, no form of custody. It's just if you commit a crime, you can have all that time given back to you. Whereas instead, I'm also serving under a probationary sentence, which I'm under supervision of the adult Montana probation and parole, which means that I'm under a whole mess of slew of rules, which is where 99% of my restrictions come from when it comes to mentioning my victim's name, where I can go eat lunch, whether I can go to the fair or not, whether I can go to a music festival or not, whether I can even go into a comic book store, are all defined by this ruling, by this custody form. It's called probation. Releasing from conditional probation basically means that I am saying that based upon the fact that I have maintained a perfect record, no violations, no anything. The only violation they claim I have is when I accidentally missed striking the name of my alleged victim from my book, from a police report that I had scanned into the book. Thousands of redactions around it. I missed one place where I missed her name. They found it. Well, Mara found it. My ex-girlfriend found it. Used it as one of her many efforts to try to retaliate and have me revoked and sent back to prison. But again, read my blog for more details about that. But basically, in a nutshell, that inadvertent act is the only act they can actually say that they ever violated me on. And the violation was minimal. Literally, it was erase her name or you're going to be revoked. Well, I erased her name and they still tried to revoke me. So, yeah, it's retaliation one step after another. But regardless, in 12 years, it's the only infraction. And it was an involuntary one. It wasn't purposeful. It wasn't deliberate. It was an involuntary act. It'd be like me going out, turning on the key to my car, and having it blow up. If 3 people are hit with shrapnel and die, am I responsible? Did I calculate and deliberately cause those deaths? Of course not. I just turned the key onto my car exploded. An involuntary act is not something that's typically allowed to be pursued. Welcome to Montana. At any rate, because of the terms of the probation, and I'm asking for a conditional release, basically means that I'm saying, based on the condition that I have been in compliance with supervision for 12 plus years. I'm asking for the court to consider that to release me from supervision early so that I can simply not have to report, not have to live under these restraints and restrictions, just go back to being a normal, well, as close to normal as I can with a felony record. Do I expect them to give it to me? No. Of course not. They don't want to let me go. They don't want to let me out. They want to keep me under their thumb. But the effort has to be made. I started this effort a couple of years ago. My ex-girlfriend, Mara, threw her hat into the ring and insisted I not be released. Claimed status as a victim. She's not a victim. She was never part of this alleged offense. But she claims she is. She claims she has a right, and she raised an objection. The probation department agreed with her and denied my release. This time I'm taking it directly to the court. So it's a little different. I've already exhausted what's called administrative remedy, which means I've gone to the executive branch, the administrative branch, where the complaint needs to be started. I've already exhausted that. Therefore, I'm going directly to the court now. Nevertheless, I expect retaliation. Previously, the reason why I hadn't done this before now was because prior to a couple of years ago, the law required that anybody serving on probation serve 2/3 of their time on probation before they can be released. And of course, for me, that was 10 years. Well, out of 15, 10 years out of 15 meant I could apply. Well, right around that same time, they changed the law. And now it's much less restrictive. It actually requires 9 months supervision on a low level offense, which basically I'm alleged to be a level 1 sex offender. There is no such thing as a level 0, by the way. Another discussion for another topic, for another podcast. But there is no level 0, therefore level 1 is the absolute lowest offender rate you can have. Therefore, 9 months is it. I've served 12 years. So clearly I meet the criteria. The idea is it's supposedly designed to reduce the burden of supervision on the state, but I've not seen anybody actually, not in Flathead. Seen lots of people try, and lots of people be denied. So it's not, even without my particular circumstances, there are people who get denied all the time for this. In my case, however, I literally have no deliberate infractions on my record, none. So, I don't use drugs. I've never violated any of the rules of probation. The one instance is the accidental, involuntary act of striking a first name of somebody in a book from a police record. So clearly, I meet all the criteria for release. Over and above and beyond. I'm well overqualified for early release. Will they give it to me? No, I doubt it, but I have to try. Which, of course, leads to the issues as to why I stopped for 2 years. And the entire subject of this podcast is retaliation. Every time I try to do something, regardless of whether it's legal, proper, it's the elements of what I'm supposed to do, I get retaliated against. Whether it be an attempt to revoke me, whether it be malicious slander through social media by my ex-girlfriend Mara, or her cronies, or vandalism to my car, or threats to do a drive-by shooting or a bag party on me on Craigslist. It doesn't matter. Retaliation, threats, intimidations follow. It's to be expected, and I'm expecting it this time. I mailed it in Friday. I'm recording this Monday night, and we're releasing this Tuesday. So as of Monday night, I'm expecting they've received the paperwork. My probation officer comes into the office. He works Tuesday through Friday. Therefore, any response from the probation office to this effort to be released, I expect the earliest it will act will be on Tuesday. That's not saying if Tuesday passes and nothing happens, I can let out a sigh of relief. No, because they're probably going to take some time to figure out what to do. They're going to have meetings, they're going to have considerations, they're going to try to find angles they can pursue, they're going to try to find something. And I don't expect they have a ready-made envelope sitting over here going, in case Glick does this, here's what we're going to do. They're not a we plan ahead kind of people. They are a, response in the minute, response in the moment, gut reaction kind of authorities. So I don't think they have a plan laid in for if I do this. I think they will respond if their past history of the last 12 years is any indication, well, technically the last 18 or since 2003, so the last 18 years is any indication, they respond, and they don't necessarily respond immediately, but they do respond. But it's close enough and proximity enough to be causal. The fear of further retaliation is incredibly overwhelming to me. It affects my health. It affects my, I think you can tell right now, I've got a cold. I'm not saying this gave you the cold. The stress I'm under, it lowers my, I have an ongoing inflammatory joint disease. I have underlying immunity issues. I take an immunosuppressant medication because my white blood cells are overactive. They attack the joint fluid. So I take immunosuppressant medications to limit those flare-ups, to limit those attacks on my joints. As a consequence, I'm susceptible. The more stress I'm under, the more susceptible I am. It's a rolling down the hill kind of thing. It just happens. I'm hoping this. I'm on top of it. I'm taking medicine for anybody that cares. I'm hoping to be on top of this cold, and hopefully it won't get any more serious than this. But if it does, I'll try to put, and something prevents me from posting for, like I'm coughing up a lung or something. By all means, I'll say something and I'll post something, or just like, which I'm sure everybody out there who hates me will actually love to see. Let's watch Glick suffer, right? But at any rate, this whole point boils down to what's the legal aspect? What can they legally do? Can they legally do what they're doing? Of course not, but they do it. They do it all the time. The primary aspect, and this is a twofold prospect. This is the government's reaction, and then this is the public's reaction, or public/private reaction. Private reaction is generally led by people like Mara, Angela Townsend, people out there who have a vested interest in keeping me under supervision, because so long as I'm under supervision, I have rules and restrictions that keep me from being free. They can come at me, they can retaliate against me, they can use the retaliation as a stick against me. They can the revocation as a stick against me, constantly dangling that sword over my head, saying, if you act out, we can make up something and have you go back to prison for 15 years. Over and over and over again, this fear is constantly there. Remove me from it, and they no longer have that beating stick, and it gives me a whole lot more latitude in what I can say and what I can do. They don't want that. Nobody wants that, who's in a position of power of authority, or in the private sector, people like Mara, who have had a pending lawsuit against since 2007 that the court still will not set a trial date for. And just for the record, this is 2021 when I'm recording this. So do your math. That's not a command. I'm just saying, do your math. But this all starts, first of all, with, let's look at the government side of it, because the government side is where it all starts. And it starts with the First Amendment. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and I'll read it to you in full so you understand the whole context of it. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now that last part, to petition the government for a redress of grievances, over and over and over again in multiple cases, Supreme Court cases, federal court cases, presidential cases, it says that right to redress of grievances means that to be able to do so without fear of retaliation, without fear of molestation, without fear of consequence. In other words, you have the right to do it, and the government cannot retaliate against you for it. And that dates all the way back to the Magna Carta, which is in 1215, by the way. Magna Carta was the first place where the people actually came forward and said, we have to have the right to be able to seek grievance against government, and they actually forced it into the Magna Carta, and the Magna Carta was signed into effect, and it became a principle of law. And remember, our country's law was largely founded upon English law. So the Magna Carta, being of English history, had influence over in the creation of the First Amendment to our country, to our Constitution. Now, what are the elements of retaliation, though? I mean, retaliation sounds like it's very simple, but there's actually legal principles that require to be defined what retaliation is. the person has to be involved in a legal activity, something that they can lawfully do. It's a protected activity. It's something they can do without fear of consequence. I have the right to walk down the street, for instance, without having eggs thrown at my head. I have the right to walk on the street. A materially adverse action is taken against the person. In this case, the example I just gave, the eggs are thrown at my head, and there has to be a causal connection between the two. In other words, there has to be a reasonable belief that the two are linked. If I am walking down the street and eggs fall off a ledge above me and hit me as a consequence, obviously they're not connected. It's a random chance. If somebody is driving by and throwing eggs at me, on the other hand, for walking on the street, and they're shouting out, "Get off my street, you whatever," obviously there's a causal relationship. And this is what happens. I take an action, I publish my book, they revoke me. I file an action in court to try to get the court to set a trial date. Mara runs the police department and says and tells people that, or tells the sheriff's department that I'm planning to kill somebody, hide the body, and blame her for it. And this is just like two very minor in comparison to the magnitude of garbage I have to deal with on a regular basis from these people. But the whole point is the government is forbidden by virtue of the First Amendment to do anything in retaliation if I seek redress. Well, here I am. I'm actually petitioning the court for redress. They're not supposed to retaliate against me for that. And yet, every time they have, the first revocation that was attempted against me was because I filed for a habeas corpus. The second revocation was for when I tried to publish, or when I did publish my autobiography, U.S. Political Prisoners since 2004. You have all these issues that are consequential and are clearly linked. And when those things happen, you can't deny that they're retaliatory. You can't deny if I go and file a motion in court to try to get the court to set a trial schedule, and Mara provokes with a restraining order, made up garbage with a restraining order, trying to provoke a revocation, or I file a book and Ed Corrigan, the prosecutor who's named on the book and on the cover of the book, prosecutes me for publishing that book. Clearly, there's a causal relationship between the protected activity and the action I took, or material adverse action taken against me for pursuing that protected act. And my entire time as a political prisoner has always been about retaliation. It's never been about a crime or whether I'm a danger to society. It is a question of how can we retaliate against him? How can we punish him for trying to do what any other normal person should be allowed to do? Whether it be allowing or directly by trying to revoke me, by restraining me, setting new terms of my release so they can make it more difficult, more restraining upon me, more draconian, or whether it be sitting back and letting other people commit malicious criminal acts against me, knowing I'm the victim of the crime, and therefore allowing it to happen because it benefits them and helps them in their cause. Either way, it's still retaliatory, and either way, it's either directly done by government or it's permitted by government. And they are working in collaboration and coordination with it. I mean, just as an example, I was arrested, sent to prison for 5 years, but a 15-year suspended time sentence that I'm serving under probation, all because I sued Kalispell. I was held for 5 years because the parole board would not release me because I refused to confess. Protected. The first revocation, as I said, was within 48 hours of filing for habeas corpus. My second was responsible to publish my autobiography. I repeated harassments from Mara as I attempt to try to get a court date or try to get a default judgment against her. The lawsuit's still pending since 2007. I get attacks on Craigslist, on Facebook. I get threats to do drive-by shootings, curb stomp me, bag parties. If there was a Batman, he would murder me and put me and murder people like Ron Glick. Or not, I don't think the term murder was ever used, but would basically kill criminals like Glick. It's just, and I'm constantly undergo that. I've had my landlord approached when I was doing book signings at Isle of Misfits. I had the business owners of Isle of Misfits approached, threatening to withdraw support and business from them if I remained where I was. I've had, I mean, just I've been accused of breaking into offices. I've been accused of trying to. I got accused at one point of trying to blow up somebody's car by taping a box to the back. This is Angela Townsend, by the way. Angela Townsend actually claimed that I had taped a box back by the back of her car with duct tape. And she says when I went in, she went inside to get the camera and come back out, the box was gone. And of course, she blamed me for it. She claimed I was watching her house to the point that I knew she'd see it, be terrorized, go up, remove the box, and then run away. It makes absolutely no sense. I mean, the things that these people make up. I mean, there's a guy on one of the Facebook posts in the rant that started that Mara's co-worker at the hospital started, which accused me of creating an app which I installed on his teenage niece's phone to spy and stalk her. First of all, I don't even know how to make an app. Just let's put it out there. I certainly don't know how to install on someone else's phone without having access to their phone directly. And I don't even know who this guy's niece is, and why would I have an interest in pursuing it? I mean, but they make these things up. There was an accusation that back when I was first going through this, that I was taking, that supposedly there was a criminal record of me in Polson where I took a shower with some teenage girl, but it wasn't an issue because I was still dressed. I mean, first of all, there was no criminal report in Polson. It was made up. But these stories, they just make them up because they don't have to have proof. People believe them, and then they don't ask for proof or evidence or anything else. When I was first interviewed by the police, when this allegation first came up, actually before I was first interviewed by the police, when this allegation first came up, Officer Myron Wilson of the Kalispell Police Department convinced Mara that I was guilty of this, that I had prior convictions of child molestation, and that she needed to get her children as far away from me as they could. No such records existed. He told her, she believed it, and then it took me 3 days to track her down. I had to go track down my own police records to prove I had no records, to prove that Myron Wilson had lied to her flagrantly, blatantly, all because I was standing up to Kalispell. At that point in time, and again, I apologize for the cough. At that point in time, I was just trying to organize kids to make statements against the police department because they were sexually and physically assaulting them in the alley behind my store. But what can I do? I mean, you sit here and you're powerless when the government itself doesn't respect the boundaries of its own limitations, and it certainly doesn't have any consequences for its acting outside the lawful boundaries of for which they're set to. This is all, every step I've ever taken in my pursuit of my original lawsuit, in defending against being a political prisoner, defending against a false charge of which I've never molested a child in my life. Every step I've taken has been legal. I've not gone, shot holes in police cars. I've not shown up at judges' houses, throwing Molotov cocktails through their doors. I've never threatened anybody. I've never pursued anybody illegally, unjustly. I go to court. Knowing I don't have a fair voice in court, I still go to court every single time. I follow the process through administrative remedy. I don't threaten, terrorize, harass. I don't do anything illegal. I've never stepped outside the law in my pursuit of innocence. I've never committed the crimes of which I've been accused of. I've been accused of a lot. These are all generated by people who are fearful of what I am saying and will continue to say. I mean, you sit here and you look at some of these ridiculous things, like Angela Townsend actually went into court and told Judge Robert Allison, and of course he believed it in his stride. He didn't really believe it. I don't think he just basically agreed with her and basically said, he did, but no one really believes this garbage. Said I went into her office, bypassed her security system, went to the office of one of the attorneys, cracked his safe, took out stock certificates, and left. Now, keep in mind, I have no idea how to crack a security system, and everything I've ever seen on the movies or anything else, anything else suggests you pretty much have to have an intimate familiarity with what exact security system you're dealing with. So I don't even have to begin to know that. I also don't know how to crack safes. Okay. I will admit, back in my younger days, I practiced with magic and escape art, and I practiced picking locks. I was never really good at it. Cracking safes are not the same as picking locks. Just for anybody who understands that principle, they're not even close. Her response to this in open court, well, he could have gone to YouTube and learned how. I could go to YouTube and learn how to bypass an electronic security system and a safe, crack a safe from YouTube without knowing the specifications for what security system I'm bypassing or what safe I'm bypassing. And for the record, the only safe I knew of in that building, because at the time I was working closely with Angela Townsend, so I was in and out of that office building, the only safe I knew about was a floor safe in the front room where they kept petty cash. I was never accused of trying to break into that safe. I was accused of a safe I didn't even know if it existed back in one of the attorney's offices, and I supposedly took stock shares. If I know there's a safe with cash in it, wouldn't I be going after the cash? I mean, seriously, the accusations that are made against me are just absolutely insane. But they're desperate. They have no actual valid complaint against me, so they have to make up the most extravagant things to try to get me revoked, to get me violated, to get me returned to prison, because while I'm out here, I remain a threat to them. I'm going to say I'm very afraid of what's to come. It may not. My fears may not be valid. They may just simply be. I've got one friend who said, maybe they'll just sit here and just decide they're tired of dealing with you and they're as tired of this as you are. Gods, I hope that's true. I hope that's true. But it has not been my experience with them for the last 18 years. For the last 18 years, whenever I try to do something I should be legally allowed to do, I get retaliated against. Retaliations keep happening. They happen over and over again. One act leads to a retaliatory act, leads to another act that I have to take in defense, which leads to another retaliation, and just keeps ongoing in a spiral. But since this has never been about a crime, it's never been about being a danger to society. It's been about keeping me oppressed, keeping me silent, to have something dangling over my head to threaten me with if I step out of line. If all this goes away, if I get released, if the conditional release happens, I can speak my victim's name. I can go anywhere. I can eat lunch anywhere. I can date anyone I want. I can live anywhere I want. I don't have to worry. I have the freedom to be human, to not live under these draconian conditions that I currently live under. The authorities don't want me free. Bottom line, they've demonstrated that over 18 years they don't want me free. They don't want me out there without restrictions or limitations on me, or the ability to pull me back and put me back and lock me back up if I step out of line too far. So, like I said, this is primarily just an announcement of what I've done, what potentially could happen, and I hope that this just continues on without any kind of retaliation. But just keep in mind, if I go silent, start checking the Flathead County jail roster, because I could very easily be in there on a revocation again. So, with that said, I'm going to sign off for the night. As I sign off with all of these, please be safe out there, and if at all possible, be free. Thank you.